Welcome everybody to meeting, drumroll, 1, 2, 3. That's a song, isn't that a song? 1, 2, 3? Feist? Yeah, there we go. Welcome to meeting 1, 2, 3 of the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology as we continue our in-depth statutory review of the Copyright Act. However, before we move on to our panel of witnesses, we have some house business to take care of. So pursuant to Standing Order 1062, the first vice chair must be a member of the official opposition, and we find ourselves without a vice chair. I am now prepared to receive motions from the floor for the first vice chair. Mr. Jauhari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to nominate MP Matt Jeneroux as the vice chair on the Conservative side. Let that be noted.
Thanks for reaction for the record.
Are there any more nominations from the floor?
Well, I'm tempted to nominate Mr. Lake because he isn't here, because that works really well.
Therefore,
I'll go
no further motions. If there is more than one candidate, no, I'm just kidding. Well, then it's the pleasure of the committee to adopt a motion. And is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt a motion? Is it the pleasure of the committee? Yes. Well, thank you. Come on, resounding. Yes. There we go. Well, then I'd like to declare the motion carried and Matt Jeneroux, the duly elected first vice chair of the committee. Congratulations. Any few words would you like to add?
Merci.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to our regular scheduled TV broadcast. We're not on. Oh, we are televised. Look at that. You're televised. With us today, we have from the Society of Composers, Authors, and Music Publishers of Canada, Eric Baptiste, Chief Executive Officer, and Gilles Daigle, General Counsel and Head of Legal Services. From the Canadian Private Copying Collective, Liette Bouchard, Chair, and Lisa Freeman, Executive Director. From ReSound, that is one word, right? ReSound, Music Licensing Company, Ian McKay, President. And finally, from l'Association québécoise de l'industrie du disque, du spectacle et de la vidéo, Solange Drouin, Vice President of, well, it's supposed to be in French here, of Public Affairs and Executive Director. Oh, thanks. So you each have up to 7 minutes, and we'll get started with Mr. Baptiste.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee members, my name is Eric Baptiste. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of La SOCAN, and I'm accompanied this afternoon by Mr. Gilles Daigle, who's General Counsel and Head of Legal Services. SOCAN is the public rights management group for authors, composers, and music editors. We currently have over 150,000 members, and we also represent the entire the musical works that are international in Canada. SOCAN has been asking for Canada to have a robust legislation when it comes to copyright for the creators to be fairly remunerated. Copyright Act always has and always will be the keystone for the entire Canadian creative sector. Royalties coming from copyright royalties have always represented an essential part of the livelihood of our creators. This is the case more than ever today with technological changes that we see and that will continue to emerge.
Copyright in a rapidly changing digital environment is becoming more than ever one of the centerpieces of creators' remuneration. I will now quote Minister Baines at the launch of the intellectual property strategy, where he said, "We know IP is critical as an ingredient in helping Canadian businesses reach commercial success. Canada's IP strategy will make sure Canadians know the value of their intellectual property and how to leverage it to improve, innovate, increase profits, and create middle-class jobs. We hope that this principle will guide your thinking as you prepare your report." La SOCAN cet après-midi désire mettre
This afternoon, our association wishes to emphasize three aspects of the Copyright Act that must be updated, in our opinion. Firstly, extending the copyright protection from 50 years following an author's death to 70 years after said death.
Canada is one of the laggards at the international level. Our main trading partners, including the United States of America and the 28 members of the European Union, have long been with a 70 years term after the author's death. Even Mexico's term is at 100 years. Our creators are clearly less well protected here in Canada than abroad. And I ask you directly this afternoon, does Canada want to continue to be in the same category as countries like North Korea or Afghanistan? Some commentators, very few to our knowledge, will tell you that increased copyright protection would be to the detriment of consumers. There is no evidence that we are aware of that the consumer would be disadvantaged with an extension of copyright protection. Let us look at the reality of many countries that have adopted 70 years after the author's death as a term. Music consumption in these countries, often more important than here in Canada, has continued to flourish over many years with no measurable impact on users. A second aspect that the committee should consider is the loophole created by subsection 32.23 of the Act, which provides an exemption for so-called charitable organizations if their use of music happens in the interest of a charitable enterprise. To be clear, it is not SOCAN's intention to penalize charitable activities when conducted in a true sense of the word, but rather to prevent organizations that circumvent the Act and try not to pay their dues. Let me explain. Currently, certain organizations, theaters, festivals, with budgets sometimes of several $1 million, adopt the position that they are charitable organizations within the meaning of the Copyright Act because they have obtained this status for tax purposes. To close this loophole, we propose two changes. First, clarify that the exception applies only if the use of music is without intent to gain. This is already the case in the exception applicable to agricultural and industrial fairs. Second, to clarify that being a charitable organization within the meaning of the Income Tax Act is not in itself sufficient for the exception to apply for copyright. Le troisième aspect concerne
The third aspect has to do with the private copying levy. The private copying system was created to counter the loss of revenues due to the appearance of certain supports, namely cassettes and then blank CDs. The current system must be reviewed and must include an element of technological neutrality so that new digital supports that are now the norm for musical copying be included. We're talking here principally of tablets and smartphones. We're also asking, as are most people in our sector, for a transition fund in order to support this important use of the musical works of our creators. On top of our three main points, we also subscribe to the request of several other groups who are pleading for the abolition of the exemption of the first $1.25 million in revenues for commercial radio stations when it comes to levies on sound recordings. The same holds true for the current definition of sound recording to isolated situations that seem to us obsolete as well as unfounded.
Mind that creators are entrepreneurs and that we must give them the necessary protections so that they can benefit from their work. There have been huge changes in the way we consume music. Smartphones have become ubiquitous. Downloads and now streaming have surpassed physical product sales, and more needs to be done to bring the Copyright Act into the modern era and to ensure the balance between the rights of users and of creators. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now we will move on to Madame Bouchard. Microphone, please. On behalf of the Canadian Private Copying Collection, I thank you for inviting us here. And I'm accompanied by Lisa Freeman, who's our Executive Director. In 1997, the Canadian Copyright Act was amended to allow Canadians to copy music on audio recording medium for their private use. At the same time, a private copying levy was created so that creators were remunerated for the use of their music. Under the Act, manufacturers and importers of blank audio recording supports had to pay a very low levy for importing all these products to Canada, which were collected by the CPCC for its members, which represents singers-songwriters, authors, composers, music editors, and record producers. For many years, the private copying regime was an important major source of income, generating income of over $300 million for 100,000 music creators, which helped them continue to create and to market important cultural content. The wording in the Copyright Act originally wanted to make this regime technologically neutral, but the Federal Appeals Court decisions and the previous federal government restricted the use to blank CDs, which made it outdated. Like most consumers now that most consumers are using their smartphones to record music, the use of blank CDs to copy music is rapidly diminishing. Consequently, revenues for creators of the private copy are also in free fall. In 2015 and 2016, Canadians copied over $2 billion in 2 billion soundtracks, or more than double that than in 2004. However, currently, rights holders are receiving no compensation for most of those copies, including hundreds of millions of non-authorized copies made on things such as smartphones. During the same period, annual revenues from private copying levies dropped by 89%, going from a peak of $38 million in 2004 to under $3 million in 2016. And if Canada had followed the European example in 2012, during the last review of the Act, and had made the regime technologically neutral so that a levy would apply to smartphones and tablets, according to the sales numbers, a $3 levy, which is equivalent to such as is done in Europe, would have generated $40 million per year. That's $240 million lost to the music sector, and only between 2012 and 2017. We must act, and it's urgent. The CPCC recommends that the government creates a technologically neutral regime so that it aligns with the way Canadians are consuming their music. The solution is to amend the Act so that the regime applies both to audio recording media as well as devices. The CPCC is also proposing that other minor amendments be brought to the Act. All you have to do is clarify that the regime applies only to copies made from a soundtrack that a person has in his or her possession. But there should be no confusion. The offering or obtaining music illegally, whether by an unlicensed online service or by stream ripping or even by stealing an album in a store, remains illegal. It must also be made clear that the private copying regime should not harm legal online musical services nor make illegal services legal. Each time it's possible to do so, rights holders license the fruits of their labors to those who wish to use it. The private copying regime only wishes to compensate authors for copies that cannot be controlled. We need a permanent legislative solution. But in the meantime, it is crucial that there be a transition fund to the tune of $40 million.
The private copying regime remains the best solution to what is an ongoing problem. Streaming may dominate the legal music market, but Canadians still value and make copies of music, over $2 billion a year since 2010. And the levy system is the best mechanism to compensate rights holders for copies that can't be licensed. It just needs to be amended so it can keep up with how Canadians consume music in a changing marketplace. With minimal revisions, the private copying regime can be restored to what it was originally intended to be, a flexible, technologically neutral system that monetizes private copying that cannot be controlled by rights holders, without undermining legitimate online music services. The process for setting levies would remain the same, as the CPCC would be required to file a proposed tariff with the Copyright Board and to prove, through empirical evidence, which devices and media are ordinarily used to copy music. As it stands now, Canada is an outlier. Most countries in the EU, Central and Eastern Europe embraced the technological shift years ago and now have healthy private copying regimes that extend levies to a wide variety of media and devices, like smartphones and tablets. A comprehensive global study of private copying produced just in December of last year by CSAC, the International Organization of Author Societies, called out Canada on the need for our regime to be updated and adapted to new uses with levies on digital devices. Without a legislative solution like the one the CPCC now proposes, Canadians' private copying activity will remain illegal, and royalties to music creators to compensate for the massive private copying of their work will very soon be completely eliminated. Canadian music creators need to be paid for this extensive use of their work, just as the businesses producing and selling the devices used to make the copies all get paid. The private copying levy is not a tax, nor is it charity or a subsidy program. It is earned income. The Copyright Board ultimately determines the value of the levy. However, CPCC's proposed levies will certainly be a small fraction of the cost of a smartphone or tablet and will be comparable to the levy rates in many European countries where the average levy payable on a smartphone, for example, is around $3, the price of a cup of coffee. As always, the levy would be payable by manufacturers and importers of the media and devices, and in fact, we all know that the cost of many smartphones and tablets is already subsidized for consumers by intermediary companies that provide these devices in a bundle with mobile network services. We can't begin to stress how urgent the matter has become. At the same time as music creators have been losing revenue from private copying, their income from many other sources has also been in decline, in part due to additional exceptions to copyright introduced in 2012. The individual Canadian artists and Canadian businesses whose music is copied for personal use can only produce and compete on the international stage if they're paid when their work is used. We urge the government to immediately follow this parliamentary review with the introduction of legislation so that the necessary minor amendments to the Act can be made as soon as possible. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, and we're going to move to Mr. McKay. You have up to 7 minutes.
Thank you. My name's Ian McKay, and I'm the president of Resound Music Licensing Company. I welcome the opportunity to participate in this committee's critical work in reviewing the Copyright Act and its impact on the music industry and musicians. Minister Joly had stated that Canada requires a copyright framework that works well in the context of our fast-paced digital world and provides creators with opportunities to get fair value for their work. And Minister Baines has stated that we need a copyright framework that effectively supports creativity and innovation. I have one more quote, and it's from an artist, the very talented and Juno Award-winning artist William Prince, who said, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, "If you want me to build you a house, I have to have a reasonable expectation that I'm going to get paid for it." As you've heard from many others, the Canadian recorded music industry has experienced significant disruption, shifting from an economy of dollars to one of pennies or micro pennies. There are critical changes needed to address outdated and unnecessary subsidies and exemptions that are unfairly preventing creators from receiving fair compensation for their work. So where does Resound fit in? Well, Resound is the organization which collects and distributes equitable remuneration in Canada on behalf of more than 621,000 artists and sound recording owners, ranging from big businesses like the major record companies to small artist entrepreneurs. We represent them directly through our member organizations and through bilateral agreements with international collecting societies. We're a not-for-profit organization. We collect from thousands of music users, including commercial radio, satellite radio, and individual businesses like gyms, restaurants, nightclubs, etc. The rights we administer are mandatorily collectively administered. Creators can't prevent businesses from using their recordings or negotiate directly. They can only rely on collecting equitable remuneration after the fact. These income streams are crucial for creators, and they go straight to creators. The money we collect is split 50-50 between artists and sound recording owners at source. Both the music industry and the copyright laws that govern it must keep pace with the rate of technological change. That is why we at Resound are always working hard to innovate. We do this by working with organizations like SOCAN, to my right, on streamlining the licensing process, or as Mark Sean, the Director General Marketplace Framework Policy Branch, mentioned to the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage a couple of weeks ago, through our Music Has Value research. We do this research to help music users understand how music brings value to their business and how they can use it as a competitive advantage. We also work to ensure we distribute royalties as efficiently as possible. This is reflected in our work to obtain full radio logs from radio stations and work with other organizations, including Bell Media, to improve reporting of data and ensure that as much of every dollar is distributed to creators as possible. And once again, that's half to artists, half to sound recording owners. But creators are missing out because of two outdated, unnecessary, and unfair exemptions to the Copyright Act that deprive them of over $60 million a year in income. As you've already heard from organizations ranging from Canadian Federation of Musicians, ACTRA, Artistia, and Music Canada, these are fundamental issues that need to be fixed. It's rare to get this type of consensus from such disparate groups representing very different parts of the music ecosystem. So the first exemption I'm going to talk about is the removal of the $1.25 million radio royalty exemption. You've already heard about this from some other witnesses, but under the current act, and since 1997, commercial radio stations have been exempt from paying royalties to performers and sound recording owners on their first $1.25 million in revenue, even when the station is part of a large, profitable ownership group. This exemption costs rights holders approximately $8 million a year in lost income and is an unwarranted and inconsistent subsidy to a highly profitable industry. It's outdated and was intended to be a temporary measure, but still exists over 20 years later. Internationally, no other country has a similar exemption, and the exemption does not apply to all rights holders. It doesn't apply to songwriter and publisher royalties, meaning that it's only performers and record labels that are asked to subsidize a very profitable industry. Commercial radio broadcasters play recorded music for about 81% of their programming time, and so that's 81% of the house that William Prince referred to earlier. The creators of the music should be paid accordingly with no subsidies, no exceptions. It's also an exception that's only available to commercial radio broadcasters, so it's not technologically neutral. It doesn't apply to newer forms of distribution of music like satellite radio, pay audio, and streaming. And it's out of step with the rest of the world. The second one is the definition of sound recording under the Copyright Act. Under the current act, the definition of sound recording precludes artists and sound recording owners from receiving royalties when their recordings are performed in TV and film soundtracks. Once again, this only applies to artists and sound recording owners, not to other rights holders, depriving them of approximately $55 million a year in lost royalties. So when music is used in a TV show or a movie on Netflix, the composer, music publisher, and songwriter all receive public performance royalties, but the artist and sound recording owner do not. This disadvantages Canadian artists and puts Canada out of step internationally. The compensation provided by streams such as equitable remuneration has become more critical to ensuring the livelihood of Canadians working within the industry. The profound impact of these two unfair and outdated exemptions cannot be overstated. The Copyright Act should be modernized to remove these subsidies and ensure creators are paid whenever businesses commercially use their work. Doing this would have an immediate effect on the livelihood of artists. ReSound is also a member of the Canadian Music Policy Coalition, and we support the recommendations outlined in the documents submitted on its behalf, many of which have been explained far more eloquently by others that have already appeared before the committee, but they include continuing the important work that has been started on copyright board reform, updating the private copying levy to make it technologically neutral, and extending the term of copyright for authors from 50 to 70 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Et le dernier, c'est Madame Drouin. Vous avez 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Drouin. You have 7 minutes. Madame Drouin, thank you. My name is Solange Drouin. I am the Vice President of Public Affairs and Executive Director of La Disque. I speak on behalf of about 250 independent businesses. These are producers of sound recordings, of shows, videos, record producers, artist managers, etc., who are responsible, among other things, of the production of 95% of Francophone musical content in the country. The independent structure of our industry, which of French-Canadian music production, was created 40 years ago and is unique in the world. To support them in the production and marketing of their work, French-Canadian artists almost always turn to local, small, and medium-sized businesses. Everywhere else in the world, music production is dominated by three multinational corporations: Sony Music, Warner Music Group, and Universal Music Group. In the 1980s, these businesses abandoned our market, allowing French-Canadian entrepreneurs and artists to create together a dynamic ecosystem. And the public here is quite attached to it. This is a situation of which that should make Canadians and their leaders proud. However, these companies remain present in our market. They are, in fact, our competitors. Is it really necessary to state how massive their resources are when compared with ours? Even if the whole music sector has been in upheaval for the last 15 years, independent businesses have been hit particularly hard by the transformation of the music competitive market, which has become unfair and unbalanced. This specificity must be taken into account in the process you are currently undergoing. You have invited us to participate in a reflection of the urgent amendments to bring to the Copyright Act for artists and content creators. The Copyright Act is an economic statute which has tangible effects on all creators of Canadian content. Essentially, the compensation of Canadian musical content creators comes from a mix of royalties and revenues that come from sound recordings and putting on shows. For those two elements to be improved and optimal, the professional entourage of an artist expends all of its energy in effectively promoting the works. The legislators, which is you, must ensure that all the concerned legislation is as efficient as possible. It's quite simple. Without consumption, there are no revenues. But when there is consumption, without adequate legislation, there are no adequate revenues either. Thus, the work you are doing will have a major impact. You have the opportunity to finally correct several elements of the Act that are currently and unjustly depriving content creators from revenues. Indeed, the Copyright Act, because of the many exceptions added in over the years, and especially since 2012, has become Swiss cheese, which considerably weakens its scope and is prejudicial to rights holders, authors, artists, and producers. It's an incomprehensible situation in a country like Canada, and it is urgent and imperative that it be put to an end. If, for social reasons, we consider as a people that it's important to benefit certain groups of citizens, to offer them exemptions and some kind of privileged position, it's not up to music rights holders to pay for that. Here's an example, and I've been saying since 1992, so since I've been at La Disque, in Quebec, for example, we have decided that it would be important for children to have breakfast every morning. And we decided that they would be offered milk every morning at school. No one asked the dairy farmers to pay for that milk, but we agreed as a society to collectively assume that responsibility and pay for it together. So if we want certain groups to benefit from exemptions because it's good for our society, then we can go about it differently. For example, by providing tax credits to or other ways, but we shouldn't ask the creators to pay the whole bill. Also, I'd like to remind you that at La Disque we agree with many of the proposed amendments brought forward by previous witnesses and some of those who are with us here today. I'll just give you 3 quick examples. Eliminating the exemption of $1.25 million offered to radio stations, amending the definition of audio recording medium so that artists and producers can receive royalties for their songs that are used in soundtracks, and of course amending the 50 to 70 years after the death of the authors, that should be extended, and amending the private copy regime so that it applies to all devices used. The changes brought by technology, of course, go to the very heart of the discussions around the current review. Clearly, the Act must be aligned with music consumption practices, and that is not currently the case. But the new technologies are tools that offer each of these stakeholders in the music ecosystem, from the creator to the consumer, by going through the professional entourage. But no matter which tools are being used, each stakeholder's actions are unchanged. Creating good music, promoting it, and listening to it. Tools will not save creators. Blockchain technology, for example, may allow them to otherwise collect royalties for the use of their work. Will that tool work better than those that currently exist? It's worth considering, but one thing is certain: without robust legislation to protect original work, and make sure that royalties are paid when they're being used, improving redistribution tools will not improve the creators' fortunes. Everyone is aware of the difficulties in the music sector, but the scope of the loss bears repeating. In Quebec, since 2004, the sales of physical sound recordings have dropped by 72%. Even digital sales have dropped by 42% since 2013. For the majors, streaming allows a somewhat modest return to growth, but this news must be greeted with prudence and lucidity. A handful of artists or international stars that have huge audiences everywhere across the world are benefiting from this system. Disc currently estimates that it's for an album to be profitable, it must be listened to 30 million times. Yet last year, the Quebec artist who got the closest to that threshold, his album was listened to 8 million times. And that artist is a member of an Anglophone music group that has fans well outside of our province. So we're very far from the 30 million required. In that context, it's untenable for rights holders to continue to deal with an act that contains a plethora of anachronistic exceptions that are unjustified and sadly unique in the world. Canada cares deeply about cultural diversity. Content creators, authors, artists, and producers are the pillars of that cultural diversity. When they can no longer make a living from their art, that diversity is directly threatened. That is the case today. Luckily, you have the power to give a crucial tool back some strength in order to ensure the survival of Canadian music production that is professional and diversified. I hope you've understood how urgent it is to act. In 2016, La Disque stated that the music industry was at a tipping point. 2 years later, today, we are quickly approaching the point of no return. We must immediately reverse course. Of course, there will always be music, but will we still be hearing our music? Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll begin with questions by Mr. Bayliss. Mr. Bayliss, you have 7 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I'll begin with you, Madame Bouchard. You mentioned a drop of $38 million per year. Was it to $3 million? Is that what you said? Even less. Okay, and from what I've understood, the act that was supposed to be technologically neutral was supposed to be, but then there was a court case. What happened? I think Parliament wanted it to be technologically neutral and that it would apply to no matter what method was used to copy the music. Is that right? Yes. But so what happened? Well, on certain supports, for example, blank CDs and cassettes, as you said, the act should be technologically neutral. When royalties began to be collected because the Copyright Board accorded levies or granted levies for audio supports that were MP3s and on the memory for the memory of MP3s, and that was challenged. That decision was by the Copyright Board was challenged by opponents who went before the courts, the Court of Appeal. So, because the law is more clear in French than in English, the Federal Court of Appeals decided that there couldn't be levies on the memories on memory cards or memory sticks that were within devices. So we lost those levies on those supports. So it's a technicality. You're saying that it's due to a technicality between the French wording and the English language? Well, that was one of the factors, yes. And so we had to then accept levies only on cassettes and blank CDs. Well, nobody uses cassettes, and the levy doesn't even exist on cassettes. The Copyright Board withdrew that. So now we've just got blank CDs left, and those are slowly disappearing. That's why we went from 38 million to 2 million. Thank you. And you said that in other countries, they have imposed that levy. Which countries would those be? France, Italy, Germany, Portugal, Switzerland, in fact, the entire European Union. You mentioned the amount of $3 as a levy. Is that something you're going to ask for? Well, the $3, in fact, comes from a study. It was a very simple study that we undertook. We went to the European countries to see what levy they'd imposed on smartphones or tablets, and that is the average in Europe. So it's about a $3 levy that's applied for the private copying regime. That is the average, and it's an average that seems quite appropriate to us. Thank you.
That you would follow the proper processes to have that $3 go through the Copyright Board. Is that right? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
To have them, like, you don't want us to change any process. You would like it to be $3. You think that's a reasonable amount given what other jurisdictions do, but you would apply as you would normally do. Could you explain that?
Yes. In the good old days when we had revenue, the CPCC engaged in quite extensive and high caliber research to understand which media and devices were in use by Canadians for copying. And we worked to develop valuation methodologies, which we would present to the Copyright Board, which would be challenged by objectors in a public proceeding. And the Copyright Board would, based on the evidence in front of it, would establish the rate. The same process would remain. We are simply asking for minor.
You don't want to change the process. What happened
Correct.
was there was a law that was supposed to be technologically neutral. For whatever reasons, that part of technological neutrality got taken away for MP3 players, and you'd like the government to reset it to say it is technologically neutral. It does apply to tablets, telephones, and whatever else.
Right.
And that's it. Then you would go through the proper process of doing your studies and then going to the Copyright Board.
That's right. So that if the evidence shows that there should be a levy on something, that we have the opportunity to make that case in front of the Copyright Board.
Right now, there's that exemption which stops you from going there, and that exemption you're saying was not actually foreseen by Parliament. It was not in the law.
That's right. I mean, our understanding is that when this legislation was drafted, it was intended to be technologically neutral, and the Copyright Board agreed with the CPCC's interpretation that it could, in fact, in its current form, accommodate levies on devices, support, including devices, not just audio recording media.
Just for my own interest, a question. How do you divvy up the pie on these things to artists? I understand how it could be on a log, a radio station log, like Mr. McKay said, but how would you, if you had this $3 or whatever, how do you decide which artists receive that?
Well, I can tell you that the current approach, there's sort of two stages at which that happens. The first is established by the Copyright Board. According to the Copyright Act, the board is charged with allocating the proportion of the levies collected that should go to each class of rights holders. So how much to the performers, how much to the makers, how much to the authors and publishers. And that has been established in the past based on evidence that the board requested and has been shared.
How does it then go to the actual artists?
Well, so those pots are separate, and they don't, they're allocated directly. And then within that, the rights holders, the members of CPCC, have developed over time a methodology for distribution of those royalties. There's a full explanation of it on our website, and I'd be happy to share more details, but we try to distribute it based on data as to...
So maybe you could submit that process just so we have
Absolutely.
it
Absolutely.
Okay. I'll thank you that. Monsieur Baptiste, vous avez touché un point sur...
Mr. Baptiste, you mentioned that the distribution of your music by not-for-profit organizations. You said that you weren't against that idea, but just it being exploited. Well, of course, we can only support charitable causes, our members, Canadian creators and publishers, are the first ones to offer free shows, for example, free concerts when there are causes that need to be supported. There was a huge concert for Lac Mégantic following the tragedy, for example. But there are festivals, there are other shows that are doing it for tax reasons. And who are abusing the system with a CRA exception, an exception in the Copyright Act, rather, but they're abusing it and trying to avoid compensating authors for music that is played either in the festival or in that auditorium. That it was not the intention of Canadian legislators. It is an abuse of the system, and we believe it should be curtailed. So we will continue with great enthusiasm to allow true charitable causes to benefit from $0 licenses. However, I'm sorry you're out of time. We're going to move on to Mr. Lloyd. I'm very sorry. We have to move to the next member.
Today, and appreciate your testimony. It's an area that I'm learning more and more about every time we get different witnesses in. So my first question will be for Ms. Freeman or Ms. Bouchard. You know, we've heard a lot about like the levying of the blank cassettes, blank CDs, and then the proposal from several witnesses to put levies on devices. But are there any other alternatives, and they don't have to be better alternatives, but are there any other alternatives to levying devices in order to recoup the funds that have been lost over the years of technological change?
I don't think there's any permanent solution. The levy is, as I understand, is the only solution. It's a simple way of doing this, as Lisa just explained how it can be introduced. It could be this. So it's for us. It's the only solution as introducing a levy. The interim fund, by definition, is interim. So our proposal is.
I just worry that for
for
somebody who has an iPad or an iPhone or any other device, like they could be doing no private copying on that, and yet they are paying a tax. Which it would essentially be consumers subsidizing creators and artists for something that they wouldn't personally use.
In Europe, many studies show that the introduction or the withdrawal of any levy didn't change a thing on the price of the tablet or the smartphone.
So who took the hit on that? Because every tax results in a dead weight loss.
Yeah, it's not a tax, and I have to. It's a tax.
It's a fee. It's
a remuneration.
A remuneration.
It's not a tax.
But in like economics, it would be considered an extra fee from what the market price of the good is. So who's taking the hit? Is it the producers? Is it the consumers?
As I said, the studies in Europe shows that many studies shows that it didn't change anything. The iPad, the tablet, or the iPhone was sold the same price, with or without this levy, which is, like we say, a cup of coffee. So it's not. It's such a small amount. It didn't change anything in the price of it. So this. And this is taking, to answer your first part of the question, it's taking into account when the Copyright Board decides on a levy, takes into account many factors. So the numbers of people who copy, the numbers of copy that are done, so it's taken into account. So people who wouldn't, so the levy is then higher or lower, considering if there's a lot of people copying or not as much. We believe that there's a lot, because our study shows right now that there's still centaines de millions.
So your studies have shown that introducing a levy will have a minimal economic impact on sales of phones, consumer behavior in the phones.
Absolutely.
But it will raise about $40 million in the study that you showed.
Absolutely. And you can even, there's an example of in some countries in Europe where there was a levy in one country, not in another country. People will not even go to the country where there's no levy applying, because it doesn't change anything on the amount of the.
Okay. Thank you.
That is so.
My next, thank you for that answer. My next question is for Mr. Mackay. You know, we've been provided information through Stats Canada that, you know, the revenues of the music publishing industry in Canada have almost doubled in the last, from 2010 to 2015, they doubled. I don't know what they are currently. And during that time, the revenue, the income of people in the industry also rose to the exclusion of musicians and singers. Now, we've been given some evidence here that, you know, the exclusion of musicians from works that are like music videos, for example, or television shows, would you say that that is directly correlated to that? Or are there other examples of why musicians and singers have been left out of the rise in income that the other members of the music industry have not?
Well, certainly the two exceptions that I talked about, the 1.25 million exemption and the definition of sound recording, contribute to that because, yes, the use of music in audiovisual medium is increasing. I mean, people are consuming music through YouTube, through sort of increasingly through audiovisual rather than audio only. So if we are not able to collect on behalf of musicians royalties on that, then whereas my friends over at SOCAN are able to do that on behalf of the composers and the publishers, then they will continue to increase in terms of collecting royalties on those uses, whereas we will not be able to.
So would you say that the current regime as it is quite lucrative to certain groups of people in the industry, but for the musicians it seems to be, it's very negative, like it's not providing them the growth?
Well, it's exempting them from being paid on it entirely. And they're the only group that are being exempted from being paid on these uses. Or in the case of radio, taking a reduced rate on these uses. And given, as I talked about before, given that the money that we collect is distributed at source 50% to the artists and 50% to the sound recording owners, it means that this is money that is going directly to the musicians. So it would make a very direct difference.
So are you saying that the radio exemption disproportionately harms the musicians as creators as opposed to the sound creators, or that they're both affected at the same rate by the exemption for radio?
They're both affected at the same rate because they participate 50% in the income.
Thank you for that clarification.
If I may add,
yes, please.
just to add something about the publishing, the rate of the publishing revenues, I would submit that you should take the revenue of this sector all into account, because when it's clear that publishing is raising, but at the same time there's other revenue that are going down as much as rapidly as they are rising. So you have to look at the whole industry when you want to have a clear picture of this industry, because sometimes if you look only at one point, you don't have a clear sense of what is going on in this industry. And as I said in my speech, that in Quebec we experience a 72% loss in sales. And we're still there, but it's a huge problem. So you have to take all into account.
And I am out of time, but thank you for that.
Sorry.
Answer.
Thank you very much. Before we continue, Ms. Bouchard, you had mentioned you were referencing some studies. Would you be able to forward them to the committee, please?
Certainly, yes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Massey, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for our witnesses being here. You probably answered a lot of these a number of times, so I appreciate your patience, but I think it is important because we have heard a lot of testimony from artists and creators about there seems to be a lot of money out there, but they're not receiving it. So the $42 million, the gap there, or 40 or 42 million that you've arrived at?
You're referring to private capital?
Yeah. Like how do you determine which artists and what percentage they get of that and so forth? Because that's the first thing I'm going to get is require an explanation. Like how do you even know who's been pirated more than others and how it's divided up and how, because if you're saying on the one hand that this is a critical part of how to stabilize artists' lifestyles and creativity right now, My concern about that is it being seen as a solution is that I know in the past there was an effort to try to tax memory cards. But the problem with that is there's several problems in it, but most importantly, I think, is that they diminished in value quite significantly anyways. And so you have to take in effect, I guess, the depreciation of any device that takes place in the marketplace for the remuneration of whatever, if you want to call it tax, levy, fee, whatever, getting back, is that you're making it either dependent upon a fixed fee at that date and time, or you're always trying to come up with the 40 million. So how do you get to the 40 million, and how does it affect local artists, and how is it determined in terms of how is the knowledge of it, like who's getting, I would imagine some artists are getting ripped off more than others, depending upon the popularity of a particular thing. So maybe perhaps some shed a light on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so just to take those two questions that I think I hear you asking. In terms of the $40 million, it's an approximation that we've made based on sales volume. So our revenue depends on what the levy rate is that gets decided by the Copyright Board, and the sales of the media or devices. So looking backwards at sales of smartphones and tablets, which are now used for copying music quite extensively, we just did the simple math. But certainly, as we said, the rate itself would be established by the Copyright Board with regard to evidence on the extent of the use of those media and devices for copying music. The rate gets set, the sales are what they are, and that's what determines the revenue. So we're just trying to give a sense of one way of looking at the impact of not having maintained a technologically neutral levy regime.
So what does it translate to, say an artist in my community, Windsor West. So what does that mean for them, that $40 million in terms of their, how is it, what do they get out of it in terms of fixing? Because I'm hearing this is a response to lost income and to support the arts and culture and
if I may.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
I think we need to be clear that what we're talking about here is the use of intellectual property. And we have to decide as a country if we want to remunerate the rights holders for the use of their work. And if we do, there are lots of ways that we can do it. The private copying regime is essentially the best system that anyone in the world has come up with to best approximate what the value of that use of the right is. So some people talk about it in terms of lost income, but frankly, it's income that's earned by rights holders in intellectual property for the use of their work. So I've been trying to come up with a good analogy, for instance. So I pay, I'm not sure how good this is, but I'll try it out on you.
Yeah.
I pay Bell for my internet services at home. I also pay Bell for my mobile network services. I also pay Bell for my television services. Those are three different services, three different uses of Bell's service offerings that I consume, and I pay separately 3 times. Because I pay for my internet service at home, it doesn't mean I've already paid Bell, so I don't then need to pay them for my mobile network services. Similarly, with rights holders, copyright is a bundle of rights, and every stream of income from a copyright is essential to cobble together, hopefully, a living so that you can continue to create and produce and thrill Canadians with your work, thrill the world with your work. So with respect, private copying levies are payment for a service, for that service that's different than any other use. So yes, we should get paid when our work is streamed. We should get paid when our work is used in audiovisual works. We should also get paid when people make private copies for their own use, because if the copies didn't have value, then no one would make them.
Yeah, no, I get that. And the problem that I get in terms of the response is, like, say, for example, if everybody speeds, then we should just divide up the speeding tickets across from everybody, because if you actually buy this device, you're a law-abiding citizen that has no interest in providing this. Or you say, for example, like we have a lot of seniors that are transitioning into personal devices that do not, and I'd be interested to find out their habits and whether or not I would suspect that they're doing less pirating, because I know that from the work we've been doing on my digital rights policy is that they're just getting into using digital devices for basic services and so forth. So they use them for much more limited activity, very specifically scoped activity, whether it be perhaps online service or that. And they end up paying the cost for, a general problem. And so it's balancing. So maybe perhaps you have a comment on that. That's just one of the things.
Certainly. Yeah, I mean, every medium, every device that has been levied around the world is used by some people, not used by other people. It's used for music copying. It's used for other purposes. As I say, if we agree with the principle that there should be some form of payment, we simply need to come up with the best possible way of making that happen, so that first of all, we come as close as we can to so that the users who are making the copies and benefiting from that right are the ones to pay the rights holders. Hence our preference to have a levy system as opposed to a government fund, for example.
Yeah.
We also, sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
Oh, no.
So
Maybe I can add something on a tablet. Maybe I can speak French. It's going to be easier for me.
Of course, yes.
Okay. Sur une tablette ou sur un téléphone,
On a tablet or a smartphone, there are a multitude of licenses that are being paid for. YouTube, for example, and other applications. So licenses are being paid for, and people will never use them. Where people who buy that tablet or telephone may never use the YouTube technology, or Bluetooth rather, and yet the license will be paid to the company that developed the technology. So it's a bit like that. There are tons and tons of licenses included in that device.
One of the categories of users of blank CDs who don't copy music has been businesses, and there's churches. There are numerous groups who have been able to work with CPCC through a zero rating program. So if there are categories of users who categorically don't use the device for copying, there are systems in Canada, as in other countries where there are levies, where we can work with those groups to exempt them from the levy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to move to Ms. Ng. You have 7 minutes.
Us, a lot of learned understandings about the business. I'm just going to pick up on levies. So you're proposing that there would be a levy on the actual device, or the variety of devices that might be out there, to which consumers would then would pay through the purchase of the device. Then a portion of that would then go to the creators. Is there any sort of, is there any thinking about, beyond sort of, beyond the levy, a remuneration scheme that actually, I sort of think about a Spotify. I mean, a Spotify, you have, artists who, musicians, who have negotiated with Spotify are then remunerated and compensated for, for consumers' use of their music. So is there any recommendation, that you would have for us around, around that kind of consideration? And I ask this because even in this short period of time, technology has rapidly changed, and is it really just simply, aside from what a remuneration scheme would look like, that by making it also technology neutral, that both those things together actually covers it?
Sorry, I just want to make sure that I understand your question. Are you asking about if there's a way to compensate for private copying that looks more like the compensation for a streaming service?
Yes.
Or
are they that just inherently different?
Right. So I guess the defining feature of the private copying regime is that the copying is inherently private. We can never know. We can't control it. We can't directly license these copies. That's really the problem that is solved by the levy regime. So again, if we're trying to come as close as we can to having the users pay, but we don't have, this is precisely the category of copying that we can't know about that is private. So we have to use data and logic to compensate as closely as we can without having a direct relationship with those users.
So, given the advent and the changes in technology and as rapid as it is, I mean, you know, we do that and will, you know, I mean, will that suffice?
Well, the other aspect of this is that the regime is fairly self-correcting. We apply for tariffs on a year-by-year basis.
I see.
And so again, depending on what evidence and what technology there is, that would certainly affect our ask and affect the evidence brought by other groups as well to the public proceedings in front of the Copyright Board to be weighed.
I think all of you, or most of you, have actually recommended that the duration for copyright be extended to, from 50 to 70 years. So can you help us understand for your respective industries who would be the beneficiaries, and sort of where that tangible benefits, might be?
Essentially the heirs or descendants of the creators and the publishers of the musical works created by the authors in question. From our perspective, this should not be a controversial issue. We're essentially asking for the same treatment for our members who ask us, what is it about us Canadian creators? Are we not as worthy as our peers in the United States, in Europe, whose works are protected for 70 years? Why not us? And especially since the 70-year term has been around for literally decades in other jurisdictions. So it's a matter of recognition, of the talents of Canadian creators, and also I think a recognition of where, in our view, Canada should be internationally on this issue. We want to be with our peers, not with what, quite frankly, we consider laggard jurisdictions that, quite frankly, have very little interest in these intellectual property issues.
If I may add to this, SOCAN has, I believe, about 5,000 publisher members. Most of them are small to extremely small businesses. And the copyrights they control that creators have asked them to administer or promote are their asset. And the shorter duration of the Canadian term of protection penalizes them in terms of the valuation of their assets compared to other publishers from other countries. So we would be enabling them to increase their value, so to not be praised to, for example, foreign publishers wanting to take over the catalog because it is undervalued. So it's the economic value of small businesses that make up the Canadian ecosystem that is also at stake there.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to share my time with Mr. Bayless.
Je vais juste continuer la question que vous avez avec.
I'll just carry on with the question that you just answered for Mr. Baptiste. Do you have concrete examples to give me of this abuse you talked about? If it's an organization that claims to be not-for-profit, but then that is actually turning a profit? Some concrete examples, if you don't mind. Yes, I will ask my colleague to answer. Look, I'm not here to name names, but I will say this. We know, for example, that there's a very worldwide festival, the Jazz Festival of Montreal, that does pay us royalties. There are other major festivals, including here in Ottawa, in Toronto, in Vancouver, that have charitable status for tax purposes. When we knock on their doors to ask them to pay the applicable royalties for their events, and we're talking about music festivals, so the use of music is of course crucial for the event going on that often lasts for days and days. We're told, oh no, we're exempted under the Copyright Act. So let's say, for example,
Need to make sure everybody gets their questions in. We're going to move to Mr. General. You have 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. It's a pleasure to hear your testimony and also have you here in front of us. Do want to touch on the Fair Play Coalition. We've had a number of individuals in front of us who've raised their opinions, who are part of the coalition, or those who have strong opinions with regards to the coalition's message. Curious, and maybe we can go through all four witnesses, and your thoughts on their proposal to create industry-led board that would advise CRTC to, and I quote, block access to websites they've deemed as perpetuating piracy. Maybe Mr. Baptiste, thoughts?
Sure. This remains an issue. It is maybe not as central as it used to be a few years ago before streaming services opened shop in Canada. There was a vacuum in this country for a while, and we developed as a result an unhealthy appetite for those websites that supply unlicensed music. Nevertheless, even with reasonable subscriptions, it's still tempting for some people, obviously, to go to free, to no cost. So it has been demonstrated many times that any moment a site or a service says it's technically not possible, it has been demonstrated many times that for other reasons, protection of children, etc., suddenly it becomes possible. If there's one element, one area of business in which owners have total control, it's the internet. It is websites. They know exactly what every person is doing on their sites. They know if I do this, they know. They know that. I've seen it. So it would remain something important to create a healthy ecosystem, even for those significant businesses like Spotify or Apple Music or the new Google service that will launch, YouTube service that will launch soon in Canada. It's about a level playing field. It's really hard to compete with free. It's really hard to compete with organizations, companies that provide services that are based on theft and piracy. So we would support this.
Sure.
We are part of this coalition, the Fair Play Coalition, ADISC, because we think that we have to put in place everything we can, to face every aspect of the problem we have in the music industry. And as Lisa said earlier, that it's all, the action put together that will make a difference. So we really think that we should, we should do something about piracy. But while doing it, we don't mean not doing something else. We have to do all those things to make a difference. So that's why we support and we sign that initiative.
Madame Bouchard, Freeman?
Well, I don't think I will. CPCC was not involved in this coalition, so I would leave it to the people who have signed who are part of that coalition. Yeah.
Ms. McKay?
Yeah, and I wouldn't really have anything to add that Solange and Eric haven't already raised. So I think they've answered it well.
So to both Eric and Solange, it's the proposal, in my opinion, would not involve the courts in the blocking process until after a website has already been blocked, in which case accused site owners would be filing an appeal. It seems to be that then there's a relative lack of that judicial oversight. You're obviously comfortable with that lack of oversight?
It's a proposal on the table. I guess it has to be discussed. We think that to start a discussion on that, I guess there's nothing. I guess we won't find, and it's the same with private copying. There's a big issue. And it's important that we do something and we start to do something about it. And I guess as we see it is that we put something on the table. Now the CRTC asked for comments. We're not stick to this proposal, but at the same time we think that it's a good foundation to start a discussion on that. So it could be modified, if somebody has a better idea, not just to oppose it, but you have another idea, another better idea. So we will be open to discuss it. But at the same time, we were 25 groups, I guess, around the table to discuss it, and that's the best we end up with. So.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Sheehan. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for your testimony thus far. Last session I had asked a question that we've been posing to some of our witnesses about how when we're doing these studies we want to know not just how it may affect large urban centers, but how this may affect, in your view, rural. There's a lot, Canada is rural, there's performers, there's a cultural economy in all those areas. I'm from Northern Ontario, it could be Eastern Canada, it could be Quebec, it could be the prairies, it could be BC, but how would these changes that you're suggesting improve those particular areas of Canada as well? I want to take a stab. Eric?
For example, that if one measure that would benefit every company and individual in the Canadian music ecosystem is extension of term. It doesn't matter whether you live in Toronto or in rural Ontario or Quebec or BC. Each of the 150,000 members of SOCAN, publishers and creators, would benefit from that. I also believe that making private copying tech neutral, that is priming the pump, that would enable once again those revenues to flow to all stakeholders in the music ecosystem, would benefit those creators in genres that don't benefit that much from the boom of streaming services. The point has been made by, I believe it was Solange, that streaming services benefit a narrow field of global superstars, and many people in Quebec don't benefit from that. Country music stars in Canada don't really shine on streaming services. It's something I say every time. So to name those examples only, by having money flowing to the private copying regime and looking at what people copy on their devices, and I'm sure there will be more country music, for example, that what is consumed on, say, Spotify, those companies and creators would benefit from added revenues, to name a few examples.
One of the challenges with the streaming in rural Canada is we just finished a broadband study, so sometimes the streaming isn't really necessary in all parts of Canada, so there's a little inequity there.
But that's perfect, because if you don't stream that much in rural Canada, and you enjoy music, you're probably likely to copy more music, to cache more music on your devices, and if you want to stick to the stereotypes and you enjoy your country music, then more country music will be stored locally on that iPhone in rural Canada, and therefore will benefit more from private copying. So it's one of those corrective measures that would help. The point has been made as well that the things we're suggesting Parliament does are, there's no silver bullet there. There's not one thing that would change the landscape overnight. It's a series of corrective measures that would put together significantly improve the situation for all Canadian creators and publishers and record companies and performers. We're all in this together, and every segment of this industry needs a little bit of help to adjust in this transition from a physical products, analog-based economy into a digital, on-demand streaming economy.
We heard a lot of testimony before about the Beijing Treaty, and I just wanted to know your opinions on the Beijing Treaty. If your thoughts on it, it came in around 2012. I think this was last studied around 2012 too, as well. So, any comments about the Beijing Treaty?
One about exceptions for the Beijing Treaty. So I believe it's one of the most recent WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization treaties that addresses people with visual or hearing impaired people. I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that we need to make sure that every Canadian has access to cultural goods, entertainment content, irrespective of his or her circumstances, and we believe that exceptions, when they're based on justifiable differences, when they're based on different situations, they're perfectly admissible. What we have issues with is the kind of laundry list of exceptions that have been introduced year after year, and regrettably a bit too many in 2012 in the Canadian Copyright Act, that makes it the world champion of exceptions. But to the best of my knowledge, none of us here has any issue with the Beijing Treaty itself.
Okay, thank you very much.
Move back to Mr. Generou. You got 5 minutes.
I'll take
Or
the lead on
Mr. Lloyd, you got 5 minutes.
Thank you. And I believe, just to clarify that the treaty in regards to disabled, access to copyright for disabled, I believe that is the Marrakesh Treaty.
Okay.
And so
okay.
there's very distinct, the Beijing Treaty is about another group of...
I'm not a lawyer, so
that's fine.
I qualified my...
No, I'm not a lawyer. But anyways, I'll continue. This question's sort of for you, Mr. Baptiste, and you also, Mr. Mackay. I know, Mr. Mackay, you mentioned in your testimony that there's a number of unnecessary and outdated subsidies. You mentioned the radio subsidy, certain other things. Now, I was hoping, could you comment on also the government subsidies that are passed along to creators? And do you believe that there's any room for reforming those subsidies? Like, are there some subsidies that aren't being used in the way that they're intended to be used, or they're not being used effectively? Or are there some subsidies that have been found to be very effective in helping the industry?
So I can only really comment on the ones that I was dealing with, and those are subsidies which are preventing rights holders from getting paid for the commercial use of their music. So it's a subsidy for the industry at the expense of the creator.
Okay.
And they're ones where commercial use is being made of the music and is being made of the sound recordings, but it's not being compensated.
Okay, thank you.
On that issue, I can help you because there's a Music Canada Fund in Canada, and we can access, and the author can access, and all the music industry can access to that fund, and that fund has been put in place in 2002. And I can tell you again how bad, has been the last 15 years, 20 years in the music industry, and we have the same amount of money since 2002. So just to let you know, and it's not 30, it's less than $30 million for all the artists, all the authors, and all the labels in Canada, coast to coast to coast. So it's not.
I've seen, like, recently in 2013, the Ontario government announced $45 million to help producers in the province of Ontario. And so maybe this question would be good for Mr. Baptiste. Like, are you finding that the government assistance, because we're being asked to consider putting levies on consumers to increase revenues for creators, and yet the government's also being asked to provide more taxpayer support for the industry. And I'm just wondering, is there something wrong with the amount of money that's being given by the government in this case, or are there ways that can be changed to better suit taxpayers?
We're not here to ask for subsidies or funds. The interim proposal in the private copying submission is an interim measure, a bridge measure. In an ideal world, what we would like Parliament to do is to just change the language to make sure that the Copyright Act would have a private copying regime that, as intended in 1997, but obviously a bit awkwardly, it would become tech neutral and would be able to deal with any kind of way Canadians copy music onto devices or whatever the world of technology will throw at us, to your point.
Thank you. I'll pass it on to my colleague.
Okay, great. So CRTC enforces quotas for Canadian content, and those quotas are often based on the CBC radio, the play on how much is played on Canadian mediums, and I guess what looking for is how do popular Canadian artists who get play on American stations and are popular in the U.S. and around the world, the Shawn Mendes, the Justin Biebers, how do they fit into those quotas that CRTC puts in place?
It is a very important point, if I may, because we are enjoying an amazing time in Canada here. We have global superstars that dominate the music scene, and it is our opinion, I believe most people here will share my view, that the Canadian content elements that have been put in place have helped create an environment that is conducive for these green shoots to be able to take root before having to go to external markets. If you don't have a market at home that enables you to test drive your music, your talent, it is much more difficult to start in the US or in Europe. These artists and creators and SOCAN members, we're very proud of that, benefit from those regulations, provided that the criteria, which are quite smart and flexible, are met. So it's a mixture of, are you Canadian? Was the sound recording fixed in Canada, etc. Provided they're met. They're mostly met, and that's a key difference. Some members have asked about the growth of the pie, and some artists or creators not feeling the growth themselves. Most of the growth came from the digital services, from streaming services, from user-uploaded content that have no such regulations. It's the usual free-for-all. And we are a very open country. It's a country that is close to the United States, with the most powerful entertainment industry in the world, that is open to Europe as well. And because we distribute money that we collect according to actual usage, if on Canadian radio 35% of content has to be Canadian, 35% at least of the royalties we collect will go to Canadian rights holders. If on a streaming service there's no such regulation, and I'm not giving you exact numbers, but we have them. Obviously, if only 3% of the music consumed of that service is Canadian, then you don't need to be a specialist in math to understand that money collected goes to other creators in other countries. So it is imperative as well. It's not copyright. It's broadcasting regulation, that at least Canadian content can be discoverable on those services. You cannot force people to click on a clip or a song. People are free to choose. It's not like a radio station, but at least Canadians should know about music that is available, that is Canadian, and they can decide, if they know, whether they want to listen to it or not. It's a key element that needs to be taken into account. That explains some of those apparent discrepancies. They all have very, very good explanations.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on some of his testimony, there may be a suggestion to you and to the clerk. It would be perhaps interesting to have in an artist or two who has experienced this, and perhaps somebody who maybe has a label of their own or something like that. I'm sure a number of us have names coming to our minds. Maybe a Drake or something like that. Yeah, it might be somebody that you might be interested in, Mr. Chair. But it would, yeah. On your cell phone, yeah, okay, yeah. So I think, yeah, it's I'm sure that there's lots of suggestions out there, but I think somebody along those lines might be something worth pursuing at your end.
Actually, thank you very much for that intervention. It would be something that we have discussed in committee while we're meeting with a lot of organizations, if you have artists that have that type of influence, it would be interesting if we were able to actually have them here to answer questions. That would be helpful. So if you know anybody that you would like to throw our way, send it to the clerk.
I got my cities right now. I understand that Beijing Treaty is about audiovisual performances, and to the best of my knowledge, we have no issue in the music business with the Beijing Treaty. Maybe other witnesses that you've seen here in the TV or movie industry have issues with that, but it's never been raised at SOCAN, for example.
Thank you very much. Very good. Mr. Longfield, you have 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks for a wide-ranging discussion here. I come from a distribution background, different type of distribution, industrial distribution, and I'm trying to understand the efficiencies in the distribution system where we've got SOCAN working on certain aspects. I've seen on your website the Layla system, some new digital tools that publishers can use to track income, track distribution, the operation costs of SOCAN and how those might have changed over time. Mr. Mackay, thinking of how you're working with bilateral agreements with other countries, helping the artists get paid for the services that their music that they're paying, and of course there's 80% of the revenue is going to the members according to your website, but there's still, you've got your own operating costs. And CPCC also has operating costs. So how do we compare in terms of our support of the industry to other countries? Do we have this layered approach which is similar to other countries? Or could you comment on how it might compare to the book publishing industry as an example? If you, and sorry, Solange, I wasn't trying to cut you out, but I mean, part of the whole.
No
yeah.
You did your homework, and thank you very much for your interest. Yes, at SOCAN, we believe very much in transparency and accuracy. We're obsessed about data points. We believe that we hold, through our efforts, one of the world's best databases of sound recordings. We control information about 66 million sound recordings, 27 million songs, etc., etc. And Layla is an effort to introduce drill-down information, enabling clients of the reproduction rights service that we own, Audium, to really follow in real time how much money has been made on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple Music. So we believe in that. We want to make that available to everyone. Technology is not the enemy here. Technology is a disruptor. Technology has created challenges, and we believe that technology is the solution to problems caused by technology. So by having more transparency, by investing in good systems and data, we can automate most of the matching between reports we get from, say, Spotify or YouTube with information we have. We can identify most of the long tail at reasonable costs. SOCAN's cost is about 10%, so 90 cents get returned to the members. We are one of the most cost-effective collectives of this size in the world, and our cost over 10 years in constant dollars have actually gone down. So technology is really helpful.
So, yes,
maybe I
please.
Can just add, as for CPCC, we are an umbrella collective. We collect the money and then we distribute the money to our members collective. So, and it's comparable to what is done in other countries. And correct me if I'm wrong. Sorecop in France works the same way. It's an umbrella collective. They receive the money, receive the levy, and distribute to the different representative of authors, publishers, sound recordings companies, and artists. So it's comparable to the other system in Europe, for instance.
And for Resound, I can echo some of what Eric was saying in terms of the importance of data. I mentioned before that we had fought very hard before the Copyright Board to get full 365-day radio logs from radio stations before we got a sample. So we're getting a lot more data. We need to manage that data much more cleverly and cost effectively. So we've then worked with organizations like Bell Canada, the broadcasters, in terms of making sure that the ISRC codes, the standard identifiers that the labels use, are getting from the labels to the radio stations. The radio stations are ingesting them automatically. They used to take what they received from the record companies and manually transcribe it and then send us logs based on that. They're now doing it all sort of automatically. So we're getting standard identifiers back from the radio stations. It closes the whole loop and allows us to do things much more efficiently.
Thank you. And with only about 20 seconds left, does the Act encompass this? Does the Act keep, or has it kept up with the distribution systems that are being used? Are there things that the Act doesn't cover that we need to consider?
I don't believe there is an issue there. We more have an issue in licensing because of the myriads of exceptions.
Right.
But distribution is the thing we do.
Right.
And we care deeply about this. Our members, my 150,000 songwriters and publishers, would be mad at me if we didn't try very hard to be as precise, as accurate, and cost-effective as possible. It is our obsession.
So the barriers to entry also for the artists are a lot lower now, so there's more artists. And I see that 40,000 businesses were licensed to play music in 2008. Now there's 100,000, so the market is growing. It's just we're not getting the money to the right. The market needs adjustment in order for the artists to benefit from the growth in the market opportunities and the low barrier to entry to getting into the market. But
yes, and the growth in the number of businesses, if I'm getting your numbers right, that's often the very small businesses, the little individual users of music. And yes, we're getting more of them licensed and paying, but they're paying tiny amounts versus the radio stations and the TV companies and everything. That would make a huge difference. Right. That's where you're talking millions of dollars in royalties that currently are sheltered and not paid for, as opposed to $20 here, $30 there.
Fees are extremely important. One example is SOCAN is international revenue. We have agreements with 100 organizations around the world. We received last year $76 million from around the world, the US, Germany, France, and UK. Our fee on this is zero. We believe that because our colleagues in other countries have already done the work, most of the work, we should not levy an extra fee on these guys. So we care very much about how much we spend to do what we do, and we don't want to layer fees after fee after fee. We are in the cost-effective business area.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to Mr. Massey. You've got 2 minutes.
Thank you. One of the things that I see in my community is that technology also was behind the times in terms of DirecTV was a good example. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, and it took really what it was about though was a better product of technology to prohibit some of that copying that took place. That's there was a big push to crack down on the consumers, but at the end of the day, it became about protective devices and that. Is there any comments you have in terms of comments in terms of the production of technology and devices and the easily accessible copying that can take place on the fact that that's taking place through some of our technology? I'm just curious to hear if you do have any comments on that, because vinyl was obviously difficult to copy. We got into tape and CD productions that lend themselves to easily accessible to copy, and digital perhaps even easier in some respects, more frustrating for others. But
generally speaking, we welcome more use of music. The more music is being listened to, enjoyed, the better for us, for our members, our creators, our publishers, our record labels, our publishers. The only thing that we want the committee and Parliament to keep in mind is that expanded use that should be easy for consumers has value, and we just want our creators, our companies that we represent, not us, the collectives are not important, to benefit from that increased value in a way that is commensurate with the enjoyment that it is creating for Canadians, and also the fact that businesses are able to be built or expanded based on those technologies that bring more music in a more ubiquitous way for Canadians.
And do you have any comments in terms of sharing on multiple platforms? What's your position on that? So say, for example, you purchase a song, and what's your position on being able to, say, for example, a PlayStation, an iPad, or any other device? What's your position with regards to multiple platforms for the same music, if you've, or movie, or a book, or anything else for that matter?
Si je comprends bien votre question,
If I correctly understand your question, for private copying, what's clear for us is that we want artists, producers, authors be compensated for additional copies. Of course, a person buys a song, they've bought that, the rights holders have been compensated, but the additional copy that's made on no matter what audio support, there is no compensation. That's what we're really trying to bring back into the copyright regime. So are you saying that because it's copied on various devices?
With regards to, you purchase a song, you purchase a version of O Canada from an artist. Do you agree with that, the purchaser then having the capability of having that on multiple platforms, or just one platform, or paying, for it for different platforms? I'm just.
If I may add to what Liette said, our members at CPCC, again, we're an umbrella collective, they're very clear that their preference is to license use as much as possible. And so typically, if you are consuming music through a legal service, you are also acquiring the right to make various copies of those works. The private copying regime is for those copies that can't be licensed.
I believe it's a market issue. If I understand your question correctly, it's about portability, it's about interoperability. We believe the marketplace is better suited to resolve this issue. And as somebody who is of a certain age now, I've bought some songs in vinyl form, and then CD, and then I bought the download, and now I'm enjoying the same songs via streaming services. So consumers are able to decide whether there's value for them if they have to repurchase or
well, that's what I'm trying to get at. Do you believe in the portability of purchase, I guess, versus that of actually having to purchase per the type of. So if you bought it on vinyl, then if you want to listen to it on digital, then you should buy it again. That's your position.
I did.
Yeah. Okay.
And we all
So
did.
that's
We all
what-
did buy them again, and we were happy. We were happy to have what we felt at the time was the ease of use, the quality, the sound quality of CD, and then better vinyls were issued. And some people, not me, some people bought other vinyls more recently that are better quality than the ones that were manufactured in the 70s or the 80s. It's not a SOCAN issue. We deal with performing rights, so this is not directly. But my personal opinion would be it's a market issue that we should let the marketplace resolve.
I would like to add something because, I've read many witness, that have been in front of you. And the music industry, we don't want to restrict the usage of music. I guess it's clear from what Eric said. The more we use music, the better. It's just that we want to be compensated for it when we have to. We want to enter into an agreement with, so we don't want to restrict music. We want the music to be all over the place. But at the same time, we just want to have the tool to go and get the money where the money is, because there's a lot of money in the music industry, but not in the hands of the music creator. It's in the hand of the internet service provider, the music services. So there's a lot of music, there's a lot of money in the music industry, but it's not in our pocket. And I guess it would be a fair share. We should get a fair share of all these businesses that make money on our products.
and this is why we need to fix the Copyright Act, which is now like Solange said, a gruyere, you know, we have to fix those holes and make sure to be compensated and leave aside those exemption that hurt the creators.
Thank you very much. So, we have time for 7 minutes here and 7 minutes there, and I gave you your extra time.
You've been fair. No, you're fair, Mr. Chair. That's
So, Mr. Bayless, you have 7 minutes.
Time with Mr. Longfield there. First of all, for all four of you, if you could provide us some data, I don't need it right now, but I'd like to know how much your revenues have changed over the next 20 years. So if that's feasible, if you could go back 20 years, this is what we got, and this is over the years, so we can see the progression, how it has changed over a 20-year period. And if you could also include your expenses, because I would imagine your expenses would have changed as well. But like, if you can imagine 2 charts you could provide us to the clerk, that would be very helpful. And we're going to finish our example, then I'm going to pass it over. But if I understood Mr. Daigle, the Jazz Festival in Montreal, it's a big jazz festival. They use music and they compensate the artists that when the music is used. Another festival in another city might call itself, say, the XYZ Festival of the XYZ town, X Town, X Festival. And they say, no, we are a charity. And so we don't want to pay. How do you propose to fix that?
2 ways. First of all, there is this notion of activities that are made with a motive of gain without getting into the details, and it's expression that's been used by Supreme Court of Canada in analyzing and determining exactly what constitutes a charitable activity. We think that that will clarify what is intended by that exemption in the Act. More importantly, because this seems to be the biggest part of the problem relating to that exemption, making it clear that merely having acquired charitable status, either for income tax purposes or other purposes or under a statute, that in and of itself does not make you eligible automatically for this exemption.
For example, someone could say, I run this festival and I pay myself $500,000 or $1 million a year, but it's a charity, so I rake off all the quote-unquote non-existing profits.
Exactly, or quite frankly, simpler than that, we'll just waive their charitable registration that they've obtained from CRA and say that's the end of the matter.
Yes.
I qualify.
Okay.
That's what we need to straighten out. It's a clarification, to be clear. We're not
You don't want to stop
suggesting
churches that are having something.
Absolutely not.
Okay,
As Eric, I think, well said earlier, we're the first to come forward,
Yeah.
and in cases even where the exemption may not apply, donate our license for
Understood.
these causes. So it's just a matter, I think, I always hate to use the word loophole.
Yes.
But perhaps this is a good example of one.
Okay, I'll pass it over to Mr. Longfield.
I wanted to come from the business side, from the artist again, that we heard in the last session about the negotiating power of the artist. And the artist has power to negotiate in certain cases, then you come to an exemption and they don't, and then they do. You've got artists entering the marketplace. There's, as I said, it's easier to enter in terms of self-publishing or using, you can have a recording studio easier than you could have back 30 or 40 years ago. So the opportunity for an artist to be able to negotiate for themselves, is that something that we need to look at with the Act to help the negotiating power of the artists? We have a website, canadabusiness.ca, now for small businesses. Thinking of the artist as a small business, how do we support the small business person who's also an artist trying to make a living in terms of the Act? And then I'll share my time with Mr. Lametti after that. He's got a question as well.
One answer on that. I mean, I think currently it's, and this is more to do with the Copyright Board, but currently it's required that SOCAN and Resound can only go to the Copyright Board to establish rates, so that even if we're able to negotiate directly with users and work out something that the users are happy with, we're happy with, it still actually needs to go to the copyright board. So that would be one thing that could streamline things in terms of negotiations between users and musicians. Currently as well, for equitable remuneration rights that we collect, the musicians don't have any right to negotiate. All they've got the right to is collect the equitable remuneration afterwards. So it's too bad that the Act then takes away the value of that right that they get to collect after the fact, not negotiate, but collect after the fact by putting in these exemptions that then reduce what they're getting that they never had a chance to negotiate in the first place.
So the Act would work well for the musicians if it didn't have the exemptions in terms of negotiations.
It would work a lot better in that then they would be getting the full value of their work, as opposed to getting a discounted rate that's discounted right in the Act.
Okay, and I'm seeing a website, but no time for that now, Mr. Lametti. But thank you very much.
Si j'ai du temps. Donc pour les redevances.
Thank you. So for the levies or royalties, under the old system, it was an approximation of the copies that couldn't be quantified otherwise. So people who bought cassettes or blank CDs, they would be using the cassettes or CDs. What do you say to the argument of that by buying an iPad or any other device, it's not necessarily the case that someone will use it to record music? I have an iPad that I use for work. I do not use it to record music. I have another iPad that I do use for music, and the same holds true for my cell phone. I don't use it for music, but I use other platforms. So what do you say to the argument that certain purchases will not be made to share or copy music? With cassettes, you knew that it was going to be used for that, or in most cases. I'll answer that question. Certainly, some devices will never be used by certain people to copy music, to record music. We do surveys and polls, and there are still hundreds and hundreds of millions of copies of songs on these devices. As I was saying earlier, there is software used on those devices that are paid, that pay licenses to Apple and Bluetooth, and perhaps, or Apple pays a license to Bluetooth. Perhaps the person will never use Bluetooth on their device. So when the amount of the levy is calculated, the authorities take into account the fact that so many devices are sold and then that there are so many copies made. So an assessment is made of the value of that private copying. Why $3? Well, in Europe, that was established as an average because they did look at it and they take into consideration the fact that not everyone is going to be using the device to record. Otherwise, it would be higher. So many factors are taken into account in establishing that amount. So to answer your question, the amount will take into account the fact that perhaps you use one of your tablets to copy music and never will. If I may add something, it's many things in life are like that. I don't have children, but I still pay school taxes, and that's not a problem for me because I know that it's good it's in the national interest. So I think all things being equal, and that's a very Canadian as a service, and I think that's very good. It's for the common good. Yes, we pay for 911 on our phone. I've never called 911 in my life. I mean, I'm lucky. I'm happy not to have had to call 911, but we're all paying for it regardless, whether or not we use it. Thank you.
Question of the day, Mr. Nuttall.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. I missed you too. I actually thought we were talking about a carbon tax here. That's why I'm just kidding. The difference is. There'll be no motions. You'll be happy to know. Thank you for the presentations, and I just wanted to follow up with Mr. Mackay. There was a couple of things that you said there that perhaps you could provide a little bit more information on. So you're looking for a removal of an exemption up to a certain amount for radio stations. What was that amount?
Yeah, so currently commercial radio stations don't pay royalties to performers and sound recording owners on the first 1.25 million of revenue.
Okay.
And that's per station, regardless of how many stations are in a radio group. So
Yeah.
if you're a 400 station radio group, you get 400 exemptions.
Okay. So has there been a study done related to the impact on the radio stations across the country? So I understand why you're asking for this completely, and I'm not taking a shot at the rationale behind your request. But I do want to know what the impact of something's going to be before putting my name behind it. So I have a riding where we have an urban area, we have a rural area. It's like literally driving across the border when you're leaving the city. They don't listen to the same radio stations. It's a completely different cultural environment. So the impact may be different on the radio stations in that urban area, which has quite a high, it's a coarse radio station, has quite a high listenership, subscribership. And then when you go into the rural area, it's lower, right? So what impact would there be on rural radio stations across the country? Have we looked at how many would be put out of business by this move? If any, the answer may be zero.
So there, that has been looked at. And in terms of, even though the exemption exists, the Copyright Board, every time they set the rate, continues to set a rate for under 1.25 million. And the rate for under 1.25 million is 1.44% of the station's revenues. So a small station, the impact to them would be that they would now be paying, a station under 1.25 would now be paying 1.44% of their revenues to pay for the music that makes up 80% of their programming day. So it's
would be in this new
would
regime.
be if the exemption is removed. And just in terms of, has a study been done of it as well, the Copyright Board actually in the first commercial radio tariff looked at precisely the question that you're asking and said, can any radio station from the smallest to the largest afford to pay the tariff? That's a big part of what they do, is the ability to pay. And they look at that every time they set a tariff. And what they said in their very first hearing was that very clearly even the smallest of stations could pay the tariff that was certified, and that the exemption was based on no financial or economic rationale and was clearly a thinly veiled subsidy. I mean, the Copyright Board, who looked at this and who looks at it from an economic point of view in terms of can users pay, that was the conclusion that they came to.
So in terms of the 1.25 million, is there being a study into a scale back of it versus a complete removal? Has there been a study into a phase-in of such a policy?
No, because as I say, the rates are already so low. There is a separate exemption, and this may help in terms of what you're asking as well. Community radio stations have a separate exemption, and all community radio stations have an exemption where they only pay $100 per year, regardless of what size they are. So if you come within the definition of a community radio station, you're not paying royalties. Okay. So that does already exempt the truly small community stations.
One other
and we have no problem with that. We would think that should continue to
respect that policy.
Yeah.
Okay. So one other question, and excuse my ignorance on the subject, and anyone can answer this. When you're looking at the satellite radio versus traditional radio, is there a difference there under the regimes that are currently in place, or is it all suited? Is it all treated as one?
No, satellite radio is separate, and the rates are set separately, and there is no exemption in the Copyright Act for satellite radio. There's no exemption in the Copyright Act for any other type of music user. So that's to what I was saying earlier. It really is not technologically neutral, and it's favoring commercial radio broadcasters, a sort of older technology for distributing music, but still a very important technology, over other technologies for distributing music.
So it's not a direct. It's apples to oranges then, and it's in favor of the traditional. And so what you're basically asking is that the global, which I think now owns Chorus, or maybe I'm mistaken on who owns what, but
it's in flux.
The Bells,
Shaw
the
owns Chorus,
Globals,
yeah.
they step up. They get rid of the exemption, and they pay fair way.
And
Yes.
I would suggest that I would invite you to look at the last report of the CRTC that has been published 1 week ago. And in that report, submitted to Madame Joly, to the Mr. Joly, they say and they show that the radio industry is the most resilient and the most stable media industry compared to TV, compared to anything else. So they're not as they're not, ils sont pas encore en.
They're not rising yet.
It's a good point.
They're not like the newspaper industry, local newspaper
They're not
industry you've seen.
not at all.
I think that my friend. Yeah, thank you.
No, Mr. Chair, if about 20 minutes ago, I made a very formal request to request that Drake attend the committee. Some were even saying it was a courageous request, but I won't name names. They're on the table. I was just wondering if we could get a bit of a status update on that call. Have we heard back from him yet?
I can't. He is working on a Degrassi High School reunion video at the moment. Oh, well, there you go.
Trying to figure out the 1.25
Yeah.
exemption.
On that note, we'll get you an update on Mr. Drake. I would like to thank our witnesses today. I would like to thank our witnesses today for your time and your expertise and your interest in this subject matter. As you can see, it's something that we are deeply engaged in, and it's very important to us. So thank you very much, and thank you to members and staff and everybody that's part of this lovely study. We are adjourned.